Let's talk about Neanderthals. For a long time, the picture was simple. They were the brutes. The cavemen, hunched over, dragging a club, maybe grunting. They were a failed experiment in the story of human evolution. A dead end. Our own species, Homo sapiens, was the smart one. We were the thinkers, the planners, the artists. We showed up, and they disappeared. It's a clean story. It's also wrong. The more we dig, the more we find. The more that old picture shatters. The real question is not whether they were dumb brutes. The real question is much more interesting. Did Neanderthals have strategic minds? Did they plan for the future? Did they understand their world, manipulate it, and make long-term decisions? Or were they just good at reacting to the here and now? To answer this, we have to define what a strategic mind is. It's more than just being smart. A squirrel is smart when it hides a nut, but a strategic mind does more. It involves foresight, planning multiple steps ahead. It involves understanding cause and effect over long periods. It means having a mental map of your resources, not just your physical territory. It means social planning, cooperating with others towards a future goal. And it might even mean thinking about things that aren't physically there, like symbols or the afterlife. So, let's look at the evidence. We can't ask a Neanderthal what they were thinking, but we can look at the world they left behind, their tools, their homes, their bones, and the bones of the animals they ate. This is the stuff that tells the story. The hunt is the most obvious place to start. For a long time, we thought Neanderthals were mainly scavengers or maybe opportunistic hunters. They'd stumble across a weak animal and take it down. That requires strength and courage, but not necessarily a lot of strategy. But the evidence from their kill sites paints a very different picture. Neanderthals weren't just hunting rabbits. They were consistently hunting the largest, most dangerous animals on the Ice Age landscape. Woolly mammoths, woolly rhinos, giant elk, bison. These are not animals you kill by accident. A 10-ton mammoth doesn't just trip and fall on your spear. Hunting an animal like that is a life-or-death operation. It requires a plan. Think about what it takes. First, you need the right tools. Neanderthal spears weren't flimsy throwing spears like the ones early modern humans developed. They were heavy, stout, stabbing spears tipped with incredibly sharp stone points. This means they had to get close. Dangerously close. You don't charge a mammoth head on. You have to understand the animal's behavior. Where does it go? When is it most vulnerable? Is there a young one or an old one you can separate from the herd? This is reconnaissance. This is intelligence gathering. Then comes the hunt itself. It had to be a group effort. A single Neanderthal, no matter how strong, was no match for a bison, let alone a mammoth. This means cooperation, communication. Everyone needs to know their role. Who drives the animal? Who flanks it? Who moves in for the final dangerous thrust? This is complex coordinated action. It's a tactical plan executed by a team. We have found sites that show this in stunning detail. One of the most famous is La Côte de Saint-Brelade on the island of Jersey. At the bottom of a cliff, archaeologists found huge piles of mammoth and woolly rhino bones. These bones were stacked. They weren't from single random kills. They were from repeated organized events. The evidence suggests Neanderthals used the shape of the land itself as part of their strategy. They would drive herds of these giant animals into the dead-end ravine, causing them to panic and fall from the cliff edge. This is not simple hunting, this is landscape engineering. It means they understood the terrain and used it to their advantage. It means they could predict how a herd of giant animals would behave when frightened. And the fact that this happened repeatedly, over generations, means this knowledge was passed down. It was a tradition, a long-term, proven strategy for acquiring a massive amount of food. After the kill, the strategy continued. Butchery sites show they weren't just ripping off chunks of meat and eating on the spot. They were systematic. They took the meatiest, most nutritious parts of the animal. They cut away the limbs and left the heavy, less useful parts of the skeleton behind. This implies they were planning to transport the food. They were taking it back to a camp, a home base. This is logistical thinking. You kill the animal here, but you plan to eat it over there later. It's a classic example of planning for future needs. So the hunt alone shows a mind capable of tactical planning, cooperation, and logistical foresight. But strategy goes beyond getting food. It's about how you organize your entire life. And that brings us to their tools. Neanderthals are famous for their tool technology called the Mousterian industry. For a long time, it was seen as static. They made the same kinds of tools for 100,000 years. This was used as evidence that they were uncreative, stuck in their ways, but this view misses the genius of their technology. The core of their tool-making was something called the Levallois technique. This is not just banging two rocks together. It's a highly sophisticated process. It's like a form of stone sculpture. The toolmaker starts with a large cobble of flint. They have to have a clear image in their mind of the final tool they want to create. Then, they begin carefully chipping away at the core in a precise sequence. They are preparing the core, shaping it, setting up the angles. All of this work is just for the final step one single, perfectly placed strike that detaches a finished tool, a flake with a razor-sharp edge all around. Think about the mental steps involved. You have to visualize a three-dimensional object that doesn't exist yet. You have to execute a series of actions in a specific order. If you mess up one of the early steps, the final strike won't work. This requires immense focus, hand-eye coordination, and an understanding of physics how the stone will fracture. This is a pre-planned, multi-step technological process. It's an algorithm made of stone. And they didn't just make one type of tool. Their toolkit was like a Swiss Army knife. They had points for spears, scrapers for cleaning hides, knives for butchering, and saw-toothed flakes for cutting wood. They would choose the right tool for the job. This shows they understood that different tasks required different designs. More than that, they were strategic about their raw materials. They didn't just use any old rock they found. They knew which types of stone, like flint or chert, made the best tools, and they would travel to get them. Archaeologists have found Neanderthal tools that were made from high-quality flint sourced from over 100 kilometers away. This is not a casual afternoon stroll. It means they had a detailed mental map of their territory. They knew where the good resources were. They planned specific trips to go and get this material. They were curating their toolkit. They would carry around finished tools and pre-prepared Levallois cores, ready to make a new tool whenever they needed it. This is resource management. It's planning for needs you don't even have yet. Perhaps the most astonishing piece of evidence for their technological and strategic mind is the creation of birch bark tar. Archaeologists have found this black, sticky substance on some of their stone tools. It was used as a glue and adhesive to attach a stone point to a wooden spear shaft. This made their weapons far more durable and effective, but making birch bark tar is not simple. You can't just heat up some tree bark over a fire. It's a complex chemical process called dry distillation. You have to heat the birch bark in an environment with very little oxygen to a temperature of around 340 to 400 degrees Celsius. Too cold, and nothing happens. Too hot, and the bark just burns to ash. You have to control the temperature precisely for a long period. How did they do it? They likely dug a pit, placed rolls of birch bark inside, covered it tightly with stones and earth to seal out the air, and then built a fire on top. The heat would bake the bark below, causing it to release the tar, which would then collect at the bottom. This is not something you discover by accident. It's a recipe. It requires a deep understanding of materials and fire. It shows an ability to follow a complex, multi-step process to create a completely new substance not found in nature. It's the world's first known synthetic material. This is chemistry. This is engineering. And it is undeniable evidence of a mind that could plan, experiment, and pass down complex technical knowledge. A strategic mind isn't just about tools and food. It's also social. How you manage your relationships, your group, your community. For a long time, the Neanderthal social world was seen as brutal and short. Life was a constant struggle, and only the strong survived. The weak were left behind. Again, the evidence tells a different story. One of the most powerful clues comes from skeletons that show signs of severe injury or disability. There is the famous old man of La Chapelle aux Saints in France. This individual was old for a Neanderthal, maybe around 40. He had crippling arthritis in his spine. He had lost most of his teeth. He could not have hunted. He probably couldn't even chew his food properly. Yet, he lived for years with these ailments. He didn't die the moment he became a burden. How did he survive? Someone had to be feeding him. Someone had to be protecting him. They may have even been chewing his food for him. This is not the behavior of a brutish every man for himself society. This is compassion. But it's also a form of social strategy. Keeping an old, experienced member of the group alive has benefits. He held knowledge, he knew the hunting grounds, the seasons, the tool-making techniques. He was a living library for the group. Caring for him was an investment in the group's collective survival. Even more striking is the case of an individual from Shanidar Cave in Iraq, known as Shanidar I. He lived to be around 40 or 50, ancient for the time. His skeleton tells a story of a brutal life. He had a crushing blow to the side of his head when he was young, which likely blinded him in one eye and may have partially paralyzed the right side of his body. His right arm was withered and had been amputated above the elbow. He was deaf in one ear. He walked with a severe limp. In the harsh world of the Ice Age, a person with these disabilities would have been easy prey. He could not hunt big game. He could not defend himself effectively. He could barely even process his own food. And yet, he lived for decades after his injuries. His group didn't abandon him. They cared for him, they protected him. This is profound evidence of social bonds and a long-term commitment to the well-being of the group. This is a social safety net, a strategy for group cohesion that goes beyond immediate, selfish needs. This social depth might also have extended into the realm of the symbolic. Did Neanderthals think about things beyond the physical world? Did they have rituals? Did they bury their dead? This is one of the most debated topics in Neanderthal research. Several sites, like Shanidar and La Chapelle aux Saints, contain skeletons that appear to have been intentionally placed in graves. They are often found in a flexed, or fetal, position. The evidence is not always clear-cut. Was it a deliberate burial, or did the cave roof just happen to collapse on them? For many years, scientists argued back and forth, but recent, more careful excavations have strengthened the case for intentional burial. At Shanidar, new analysis of the soil around a skeleton found that the sediment was dug out and then refilled. The body was deliberately placed in a dugout hollow. They even found clumps of ancient pollen, which led to the romantic flower burial theory that the Neanderthals had placed flowers in the grave. While the pollen might have been brought in by burrowing rodents, the evidence for the deliberate placement of the body itself is strong. Why is this important? Because burying the dead is a profoundly strategic and symbolic act. It shows a response to death that goes beyond just disposing of a body. It implies a certain kind of respect for the deceased. It might suggest a belief in an afterlife, or at least a sense that the person's identity continues in some form. It is a ritual, and rituals require planning and abstract thought. You are performing an action not for an immediate, practical benefit, but for a social or symbolic one. This points to a mind grappling with some of the same big questions we still ask today. And the symbolic world of the Neanderthals might not have ended with death. For a long time, it was assumed that art and personal adornment were the exclusive domain of Homo sapiens. Neanderthals, we thought, had no art. But that picture is also changing. At several sites in Europe, archaeologists have found eagle talons with cut marks on them, suggesting they were worn as pendants or ornaments. They have found seashells with traces of pigment, some of them perforated as if to be strung on a cord. These are not tools. They serve no practical purpose for survival. They are about aesthetics. They are about identity. Wearing a necklace of eagle talons is a statement. It's a symbol of power, of skill, or of group affiliation. This is symbolic communication. The most spectacular piece of evidence for Neanderthal symbolic activity lies deep inside Brunicle Cave in France. About 300 meters from the cave entrance, in total darkness, is a bizarre construction. Someone, long ago, broke off hundreds of stalagmites from the cave floor and arranged them into 2 large rings and several smaller piles. They then built fires on top of some of these structures. Dating techniques showed these structures are about 176,000 years old. That is long before modern humans arrived in Europe. The builders had to be Neanderthals. Think about the strategy and planning involved here. This was not a quick or easy job. It was deep inside a cave, far from the light of day. They would have needed torches for light. They had to work as a team to break off and move over 2 tons of rock. And they had to have a plan, a blueprint in their minds for the structures they wanted to build. And for what? This was not a shelter. It was not a place for butchering animals. The purpose was clearly not utilitarian. It was symbolic. A ritual space? A place for ceremonies? We will never know for sure. But what we do know is that it represents a massive, planned, cooperative project with a purely symbolic goal. It is an act of construction that reshapes the natural world according to a preconceived idea. If that isn't a sign of a strategic, abstract mind, then nothing is. So, if Neanderthals had all the complex hunting strategies, the advanced tool technology, the social compassion, and even the beginnings of symbolic thought, why did they disappear? And why did we hold on to the brutish caveman idea for so long? The second question is easier to answer. The first Neanderthal skeletons discovered in the 19th century were interpreted through the lens of the time. Scientists saw a creature that was not us, and they emphasized the differences. The skeleton from La Chapelle aux Saints, which we now know was an old man twisted by arthritis, was used as a type specimen for the entire species. He was reconstructed as a stooped, ape-like creature. We created an evolutionary ladder with ourselves at the top, and we needed someone on the rung below. The Neanderthal was cast in that role. It was a story that flattered us. The question of their extinction is much harder. If they were so smart and strategic, why aren't they still here? There probably isn't one single answer. It was likely a perfect storm of factors. First, the climate. The world Neanderthals lived in was incredibly volatile. Ice ages came and went, and the landscape changed dramatically. They were supremely adapted to a certain kind of cold, open, woodland environment. But when the climate shifted rapidly, their strategic system, which had worked for hundreds of thousands of years, may have been too slow to adapt. Second, population size. Genetic evidence suggests that Neanderthal populations were always small. They lived in scattered, isolated groups. Small populations are vulnerable. A bad winter, a disease, or a few failed hunts could wipe out an entire group. They had less of a genetic and social buffer than the larger, more interconnected populations of Homo sapiens that were beginning to arrive. And that brings us to the third factor us. Homo sapiens arrived in Europe around 45,000 years ago after Neanderthals had been there for hundreds of thousands of years. We weren't necessarily smarter in a raw, individual sense. A Neanderthal and a human from that time might have been intellectual equals, but our species may have had a different kind of strategic advantage. Our social networks seem to have been larger and more wide-ranging. We traded goods over longer distances, we shared information more broadly. This created a larger pool of collective knowledge and innovation. Our technology also changed more rapidly. While Neanderthal tools were effective and consistent, human tools were constantly being refined and diversified. This might have given us a competitive edge in exploiting a wider range of resources, especially as the climate changed. And perhaps our symbolic thinking was different, more potent. We were painting magnificent animals on cave walls. We were carving intricate figurines. This explosion of art suggests a change in how our brains work, perhaps allowing for more complex language and the ability to share more complex ideas. This could have allowed for better coordination, more complex social rules, and a stronger sense of shared identity, making our groups more resilient. So, the disappearance of the Neanderthals is not a story of a dumb species being replaced by a smart one. It's a much more complex and tragic story. It's a story of an intelligent, successful, and strategic group of humans who were faced with unprecedented environmental challenges and a new, highly competitive species. Their strategies, which had served them so well for so long, were ultimately not enough to overcome that combination of pressures. They might have been conservative strategists in a world that suddenly demanded radical innovation. So did Neanderthals have strategic minds? The evidence says yes, a resounding yes. They planned their hunts with tactical precision. They engineered their landscape. They curated their technology with foresight. They invested in their social relationships with long-term compassion. They even began to explore the world of symbols, to shape their world according to ideas rather than just needs. They were not a failed experiment. They were a different kind of success. They were a parallel line of humanity that thrived on this planet for far longer than we have so far. To think of them as brutish, grunting cavemen is to do them a grave injustice. It is also to misunderstand ourselves, because in their bones, in their tools, and in the strange structures they built in the dark, we see the echoes of a mind that was, in many ways, very much like our own. They were planners, they were thinkers, they were strategists, they were human.